Hey guys, welcome to my macro guide. We are going to talk about all the macros for Death Knight, all the macros possible. You will find this very useful if you play Frost Spec or Unholy Spec, although there is probably a bit more macros for Unholy Spec. Right now on the screen you will see a link. Basically goes to a video which explores pet macros in a little bit more detail. I don't want to spend too much time in this video because it will take quite a while to cross all the pet macros, as there's quite many. Okay, so let's just get straight into it. The first macro you're going to need for Arena is basically a macro that will put the arena players on a focus. So it's 3 separate macros which do pretty much the same thing. Basically what this macro does, it will put the first arena player in arena on a focus, and then the next one be the second player and the third player. Okay, and that's basically how it goes. This is really important because it sets up pretty much all the other macros that work with a focus after, and you really do need to be switching the focus around rather than clicking the frames. And also a lot of some classes stealth, and when the stealth the focus goes, especially with priest, it's very frustrating, but if focus goes, you're trying to do a CC on priest, sometimes you waste a lot of time trying to find the frame. If we just use this macro, bam, back on the focus. So that is your bread and butter of macros, that's your foundry before we can start learning about other macros. Okay, so the first macro is a healing macro, and it's Lichborn healing macro, and basically what it's going to do, it's going to cast Lichborn and start using death coils at the player, which is obviously yourself. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly show this macro in action, not targeting myself or anybody, as you can see. I mean, let's just show an example. I'm actually targeting my pet right now. I'm going to start spamming a macro. I'm doing a death coils on myself. Okay, so staying on the topic of healing, the next macro is Death Pact, but it isn't just going to do Death Pact. What this will do is if you have your gargoyle summoned, it will use Death Pact on the gargoyle instead of your pet, because as you know it does weaken your pet a bit using Death Pact, but the thing is people don't really do damage to your gargoyle, so when your gargoyle's up it will half the gargoyle's health, and it's not really anything to worry about it that much because I mean it's out of melee range, to be honest. But if your gargoyle isn't up, it will just use it on the pet anyway, and if your pet isn't up it will summon your pet. So it's pretty simple. Basically every time you use this, you know you're actually going to get the heal and it will not like break, basically. The next macro is a frost specific macro really, because it only works in frost, but basically it does a raise dead and the death pact completely at the same time, so you get the heal straight away, so you don't have to separate the keybind. This macro here I call it stance macro because it will switch between Unholy and Blood Presence. And this one right next to it is basically the same, but Frost Presence. It's best to use the macro like this rather than a cast sequence, because basically it will, if you're in Blood Presence right now, it will recognize you're in Blood Presence and cast Unholy Presence. So it's okay to have them in the same one. So if I'm just clicking this now, it will just keep switching between presence and it works absolutely perfectly. This macro here basically cancels auras. Such as Hand of Protection, Lichborn, Ice Block, Hand of Freedom. I'm pretty much sure I can fit some more in there basically. But when you steal a spell like Ice Block, sometimes it's best to use this macro to get out of it. If you use Lichborn, you put yourself at a disadvantage against priests because they can shackle you, and I think paladins can do something pretty deadly to you as well. So sometimes it's better, get your healing out done and don't let Lichborn linger around. Just use this macro and it will get rid of Lichborn. Okay, now let's talk about the one-shot macro, which basically is going to cast Summon Gargoyle and Unholy Frenzy, or both at the same time. They both share the same cooldown, so I definitely recommend using them at completely the same time. I also put Unholy Frenzy on a mouse over, so in case I'm getting tunneled too much damage, Unholy Frenzy does actually drain your health when it's applied. I can mouse over, imagine there's a frame here, and mouse over while I press the macro and it will go on whoever I put the frenzy on, probably my friend in arena, to increase his haste. Okay, so this macro basically is Necrotic Strike, but it's also going to use Blood Tap at the same time rather than separately. This macro does work. I know you might think that using Blood Tap with Death Coil doesn't work, because it doesn't, but this really works. Basically when you get when you have a Death Rune, right, and you use that Death Rune, but you also have Blood Taps, what it's going to do is going to use a Death Rune and it instantly replenishes. So I'm just going to show this now. So I have a Death Rune up and I'm going to use it and it's going to replenish straight away. And if I keep clicking it, see it's replenished. and it really does provide a much quicker and efficient way to stack necrotics, basically. Okay, now we're going to move into a very universal type of macro, and it's called a mouse over macro. What a mouse over macro does, basically, all you have to do is mouse over with your mouse, obviously, and then you use the ability, and it will affect the mouse over target. So I'm just going to show an example there. I didn't actually target then for some reason. See, I'm staying on that target, but I'm going to keep. The abilities go to the mouse over despite I'm targeting something else, basically. I would recommend using this mouse over macro. Let me just quickly show you, obviously. First best example I have is, see, there's a Death Grip here. Okay, I would recommend using it for Death Grip, Icy Touch, Death Coil, Howling Blast, Strangulate / Asphyxiate, Chains of Ice, Outbreak, Dark Simulacrum, and Plague Leech. For a long time I have only been relying on mouse over macros. That's before I decided to focus on a thing called focus crowd control macros, which are basically macros that affect your focus target. Focus target basically is a target separate from your actual target, and basically you're focusing them. You see a cast bar and everything, and focus macros will affect whoever you're focusing. So that could be anybody. That could be like a healer in arena, basically. Okay, so this is the first focus macro you're gonna have to learn. Basically, Strangulate, working on a focus, but it's not just simply at the focus. When you press the key normally, it will affect your target. If you hold down Shift and that key, it will switch to your focus target. So it's basically saving up space on your action bars. Also recommend using this for Mind Freeze. Mind Freeze at focus. I do that in a separate macro. I've got to show you a quick clip now of me using focus. Oh yeah, and also sorry, Chains of Ice. You want to be using it for Chains of Ice. So there we go, at the focus, Chains of Ice. So here's some clips. Okay, so the last type of macro is very similar to the first macro we discussed, which is the one that puts focuses on each arena player. Now we're going to take that same principle and we're going to apply it to Death Grip and Dark Simulacrum. Well, you can actually apply it to whatever you want, but at the moment I'm just sticking to applying this to my Death Grip. So here we go. Say it's /cast at arena 1, so that's the first arena player, Death Grip. I would definitely recommend having these key binded to the same ability with shift modifiers. For example, for Death Grip I have 3 as a normal Death Grip. When arena player 1 it's shift 3, and 2 alt 3, and 3 is control 3. You know, it's just better to do it like that in my opinion. Also have this for Dark Simulacrum, so I have 3 separate macros here at each arena player, and also have the mouse over one. One last thing I forgot to include is the one-shot macro for Frost Death Knight, which is basically /cast Pillar of Frost and Raise Dead. I also like to put Raise Dead in the one-shot macro. The other things I have in there, basically, you ignore them as potions and things. Whatever else you can fit into the one-shot macro, for example, a trinket or potions, you know, fill it in, may as well, because basically the purpose of a one-shot macro is to just put as much buffs in one place at once. But don't put Horn of Winter in there. If you're an alchemist, then you might want to have Horn of Winter and the Alchemist's Flask in the same macro, just to help you remember to keep applying it, because, you know, bit of a waste if you're an alchemist and you keep forgetting to actually use the flask. Okay, thanks guys for watching the video. Again, the link on the screen right now is the link to my pet control macro. It's going to teach you how to do stuff like that and stuff like that. Basically getting your pet around doing stuff and crowd controlling and pressuring and lots of things like that. Okay, so thanks for watching the video, guys. Remember to comment, like, subscribe, and favourite, and share with all your friends on Facebook. Ciao.